Team Trump or Team DeSantis? That at least is the false dichotomy of our choices for presidential candidates in 2024. I'm very pleased to bring to you guys a discussion that I'm going to have with Vivek Ramaswamy. I've been paying attention to his campaign. He should be discussed more, and I'm just interested to hear what he has to say. That's what's.
I'm very happy today to talk with Vivek Ramaswamy, who has just announced his candidacy for the American presidency.
You're running for president.
I am.
Running for president. Yeah, you're actually polling third behind Trump and DeSantis right now. The latest Fox poll shows you
a distant third.
A distant third.
A distant third, yes.
As America debates how old is too old to be president, the youngest candidate that's announced in the 2024 field is currently introducing himself to voters. Vivek Ramaswamy is a 37-year-old multimillionaire who graduated from Harvard College and Yale Law School. He made his fortune at a hedge fund and in biotech, and he ran an asset management company which calls itself Anti-Woke. A first-time candidate for political office, he says he has plans to start an anti-woke cultural movement.
You're doing surprisingly well if I look at the people who bet, which is not perfect, but the most reliable guide. You're in 5th place among the Republicans. You're ahead of Kristi Noem, ahead of Mike Pence.
We're looking to be number one. That's the goal. But it's a steady climb to get there. I mean,
I'm qualified for the debate stage already. Mm-hmm. I tend to like settings where we're debating. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that goes well. And, we'll see where this takes us.
Does anybody who's not a white male really stand a chance of being a Republican nominee?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. I think that there is
They don't seem like they're open to that kind of diversity.
I'll be honest with you. I travel the country. I have not really experienced meaningful racism from grassroots conservative audiences for the last, several years that I've been since I stepped down from my business career.
I can absolutely blame white supremacy, 100%.
Really?
Yeah.
See, say more, and then I'll respond to that.
I mean, just look at the history of the country. Like, it's just really just that simple for me. The country has never fulfilled its promises of freedom, liberty, and justice for all. It's always been freedom, liberty, and justice for some. And usually that some is white people.
So here's what I would say in response to that. That is obviously true that the nation has fallen short of our promise since our founding. But walk through some obvious facts about America. We're not founded on an ethnicity or a monarch or a food or even a religion. We're founded on a set of ideals that brought a group of people together in 1776, and we live by those ideals. At least we aspire to those ideals today. A nation that aspires to ideals that's not made up of gods, but made up of human beings will always fall short of those ideals. So I think our worst hypocrisies as a country, and we have many of them, our worst hypocrisies are our best evidence that we have ideals at all. You take a look at other countries. Nobody ever calls the Chinese Communist Party a hypocrite, or China a hypocrite, or Iran a hypocrite. Why is that? Because to be a hypocrite, you at least had to have ideals in the first place.
But a lot of
and so we're imperfect, but we are about the pursuit of a more perfect union, the pursuit of happiness. So America's about the pursuit. And so I think that trashing ourselves, I think we are actually. The reason
I say that is because, we never were included in those ideals originally.
Originally. Yeah. But never and not originally are two different things. Mm-hmm. Originally, that's true. Mm-hmm. Over 250 years of progress, if you had somebody who was in 1870 looking at the world we live in today, if you had somebody in 1960 who was looking at the world we live in today as it relates to race in America, we would be darn close to what they would have thought of as the promised land. So I think we have to recognize that America is about that pursuit.
All right, so I want to start out with something that you posted on Twitter, saying affirmative action is the single greatest form of institutional racism in America today. Why do you feel that way?
I think by definition, there are institutions that regularly take race into account as a factor on whether or not someone gets a job or whether or not someone gets a seat in college. By definition, that's institutionalized racism. And I think the Supreme Court made the right decision today to vote on the side of meritocracy over race-based preferences. I think that's a step forward. It's not a destination. As the next U.S. president, if I'm elected, I would eliminate race-based affirmative action in every other sphere of American life as well, including in the economy where it runs rampant today. So the reality is, and by the way, I went to public schools through 8th grade. It was racially diverse, majority black or something close to it. There wasn't a single one of those black kids that could not have achieved everything that I have in my life. I've lived the American dream. I'm now running for U.S. president. If they had also been given the same privilege that I had, which was 2 parents in the house and a focus on education. There's a crisis of fatherlessness, not just in the black community, but across America, across multiple races. There's good evidence that people are more likely to end up in poverty, more likely to drop out of high school. Let's address the family structure. Let's deliver school choice. I think that's something that actually does give a lot of Americans, including it's lifted up a lot of black Americans in the states that have adopted it, allowing families to choose to send their kids to the best possible school they can. That's how we deliver solutions.
Explain to me your position on this civic duty voting.
Sure. So my position is, I think that every kid who graduates from high school should know the minimums about the country that we require an immigrant to know about the country in order to become a citizen. So there's a test. My mom had to pass it. Every immigrant has to pass it to this country that asks you some basic questions. What are the 3 branches of government? What branch of government does the U.S. president lead? Some basic questions about what is the Bill of Rights. It's like a multiple choice exam, or some of them you write in. I think that if we're going to ask immigrants to pass that test, as we should, I think every 18-year-old who graduates from high school should have to pass that as well, because young people, it goes back to that issue of pride. You don't value a country that you don't know something about. You don't value something you inherit. You value something you have a stake in creating, in building, or knowing something about. So how do we think big about this? Well, young people, as I told you, most of them, very few of them vote as it stands today. Super small numbers. And apparently 60% of them say they would rather give up their right to vote than give up TikTok. Well, I say, all right, let's take that to the next level. How about we do something that raises the voting age from 18 to 25, but you still get to vote at 18? I think youth voting in this country will skyrocket. After, from a very low level right now, it will skyrocket because you value something you actually have to earn. And I think that this is not a left-wing or right-wing point. We all have duties as citizens, right? You know, we aspire to free market capitalism, right? Materialist advance. And that's the life I've lived as well, by the way. My parents came to this country with not a lot of money. I've lived the American dream. I've made a lot of money by building businesses. That's one side of what it means to be an American. But part of it is we also have duties to this country.
It says that if you're the chief executive, if you're the president of the United States, and you can't fire somebody who works for you, or for that matter, tens of thousands of people who work for you, that means that they don't work for you. It means that you work for them because you're accountable for what they do without having any authority to change it. And that's not what Article 2 of the Constitution says. So I take a strong view of executive authority when it comes to downsizing, that these civil service protections, these are congressional statutes from a long time ago that sort of said, your civil service, if you're a civil servant, you can't be fired. I think those are unconstitutional if that's actually what a president of the United States believes is the right way to affect the laws of the country. So I'm, again, the first person here to say that I will shut down the U.S. Department of Education. It's not an agency that lends itself to reform. You have tens of thousands of people showing up to work, carrying out a mandate they should have never had in the first place. You can't reform that. I love Betsy DeVos. I think that, President Trump did a great job putting her in charge of the Department of Education. But when an agency fundamentally should not have existed in the first place, you're never going to solve the cancer that it creates on our national soul by just incrementally tinkering around the edges or even putting the right figurehead on top. You have to shut the thing down.
Mm-hmm. And so actually, I tell this to conservative audiences all the time, obsesses over the question of the who. Ronna McDaniel, she was the chair of the Republican Party versus somebody else, or Kevin McCarthy or somebody else, or Donald Trump or somebody else. This is a superficial discussion versus actually just taking a step back. And the Republican Party does not do this enough. What do we stand for? And why do we stand for it? Actually, a lot of my criticisms are also directed at the fact that we define ourselves. When I say we, I'm running as a Republican, but as a party in opposition to something. All right, that's what Joe Biden did. That's what the radical left does. And race, gender, sexuality, climate. I'm opposed to a lot of these ideologies of identity, but the right falls into the trap of just saying we're not those things. And then we'll fight about which biographies win. Oh, I'm actually a bigger and more accomplished person than you, and I'm going to sling mud at you. Versus asking the question of, what do we actually stand for? For me, it's about individual, family, nation, God. You can agree or disagree, but at least that's a vision that's different from a vision of identity grounded on race and gender and sexuality and climate. And so that's a long way of saying, I guess, what I see is deficient in the field, entire Republican field, including candidates you mentioned, is they're all running from something. And I'm in this race because I want us to run to something.
What is that something?
A vision of what it means to be American. Okay? Revive the ideals of 1776. Revive the truth, meritocracy, excellence, freedom of speech, rule of law. A radical idea. This is not a Democrat or Republican idea, that the people we elect to run the government ought to at least be the ones who actually run the government.
I've built businesses. Yes, I've been a constitutional scholar, Yale law educated, all that, but I actually bring a private sector perspective to interpreting Article 2 of the Constitution, which says that if you're the chief executive, if you're the president of the United States, and you can't fire somebody who works for you, or for that matter, tens of thousands of people who work for you, that means that they don't work for you. It means that you work for them because you're accountable for what they do without having any authority to change it. And that's not what Article 2 of the Constitution says. So I take a strong view of executive authority when it comes to downsizing, that these civil service protections, these are congressional statutes from a long time ago that sort of said, your civil service, if you're a civil servant, you can't be fired. I think those are unconstitutional if that's actually what a president of the United States believes is the right way to affect the laws of the country. So I'm, again, the first person here to say that I will shut down the U.S. Department of Education. It's not an agency that lends itself to reform. You have tens of thousands of people showing up to work, carrying out a mandate they should have never had in the first place. You can't reform that. I love Betsy DeVos. I think that, President Trump did a great job putting her in charge of the Department of Education. But when an agency fundamentally should not have existed in the first place, you're never going to solve the cancer that it creates on our national soul by just incrementally tinkering around the edges or even putting the right figurehead on top. You have to shut the thing down. Is the FDA makes it so dang hard to develop a new drug in that area, where they will say you need this many phase 2 studies, this many phase 3 studies, which I could get into the details of it, but the level of certainty that you have on the safety and efficacy trade-off there, you're just asked to repeat that over and over again. Guess what contributes to the cost of drugs? It is indeed that overregulation and the time horizon that it takes. Yet that is the same FDA that will tell you that that is required for that level of certainty before you can put that small molecule chemical through someone's mouth, into a body, through means that have been known for 100+ years. That will then tell you that those standards go out the window when we feel like it. And we're going to have suddenly the least tested, most broadly distributed, government foisted, and even mandated vaccines or therapies known to mankind. You can't believe those things at the same time unless you're operating according to a sort of religious cult. I think really winning is actually about speaking truth and being willing to act on those convictions. And if I do win this thing, we're going to take what President Trump set into motion, but really take that to the next level, not just tinkering around the edges, not just exposing the problem of this permanent administrative state, as he did in many cases, right? He exposed the swamp. He exposed the deep state. If you actually want to do something about it, you have to be willing to gut the thing, take a sledgehammer to it and shut it down. And the Department of Education is a perfect example of even these local uprisings we're seeing, as good as those are. They're not going to go the distance as long as you have an economic incentive structure created by the federal government.
You mentioned Trump. You have good things to say about him, and you're saying that you're going to kind of just further, I guess, take his initiatives and take it a step further. So why
take
run
it to the
against
next level?
him? Yeah, take it to the next level. Why run against him?
So I think you get to be an outsider once. And so I respect the heck out of what he did in 2015 and 2016. He came in as an outsider and had no inhibition for the inhibitions you have if you grew up within that system. Okay. So I can't tell you what my situation will be after 1 or 2 terms in office, but I will tell you, I don't have any of those inhibitions today. The swamp has not drained me yet. Okay. And so I think you get that fresh energy as an outsider once. And I think that President Trump laid a foundation. Somebody had to do it. So I can't believe in 4 years that you can have at once both exposed the problem and solved it. But exposing the problem, it wears on you. I mean, I'm President Trump is a friend. As I understand, you guys know each other. You're friendly as well. Is he the same person today that he was even back in 2015? Of course not. These experiences change you. Will I be the same person 4 or 8 years after serving that I am today? No, but I'm fresh and ready to go. And I have actually seen a lot of the areas where he could have gone further but didn't. I'm not saying I would have done better in 2016 either, but against the backdrop of learning from that foundation and having fresh legs and the lack of inhibition to actually address the problems, there's a reason why I'm the only candidate willing to talk about ending affirmative action. I'm the only candidate willing to talk about abandoning the climate cult. I mean, these are two of my top priorities. These are things a president of the United States can do. Shutting down the Department of Education. A chief executive can actually do this. I'm not blaming President Trump for not doing it, but if he was going to do it, it would have happened already, right? We still have a U.S. Department of Education. He put the best person he could have in charge of it. This is about taking that to the next level. And so my best case scenario here, Candace, would be I would love to have him as an advisor, okay? I don't want to do this alone. We want to do this for the country. It's not even about me, right? So if he has experiences of how he may have run into that deep state, run into that permanent state, and run into obstacles, I want to know about them. And I don't want to just know about them in advance. I want to know about them every day in real time. I think he could make for a legendary presidential advisor because unlike the other advisors who themselves are creatures of the so-called swamp itself, you want somebody who actually had the experience of trying, having had some successes, and then having had some failures along the way. The next time you have an Anthony Fauci or Merrick Garland or James Comey or whoever who resists their legally ordained scope, you got to do what the Constitution empowers you to do. You fire them. You fire the managerial industrial complex around them, the legions of people under them. Now, I want to know, did that occur to President Trump? What obstacles did he run into? Great. Arm me with that. But I've got fresh legs. I've got no inhibitions. I don't care if somebody's going to, I think you're going to have a tough time calling me a racist or a white nationalist or whatever, but I'm sure that will come too. But I'm unshackled, and you can already see that based on the fact that I'm already taking on issues that even President Trump would have had some difficulty, did have some difficulty taking on. I pressed his policy people on why they didn't touch the affirmative action issue. They said it was not a political hill they wanted to die on. That's an exact quote. Well, you know what? You could drag my dead body out of the White House before I finish taking on that, before I'm abandoned taking on that issue. And I think that we need to be the party, the GOP, that nominates the outsider. I think that should be the tradition. Let the Democrats be the party of the professional politician. And this is why it really gets under my skin when we see the professional politician, the donor class favorites rising up the ranks of our party now, which is where my bigger beef is here, not with President Trump. But I think we should be the party for the presidency, not for the Senate, not for Congress, not even for governors. We could debate that on governors. But for the presidency, we need somebody who comes in as an outsider and starts the cycle of the phoenix again. Sometimes you got to burn it down a little bit to be able to have something new that actually rises from the fertile ashes. That's going to be a big part of my approach to governing, starting with that administrative state.
And lastly, your thoughts on Governor Ron DeSantis. And he is the establishment favorite.
He really is. So look, I want to say that I respect a lot of the things he's done in Florida. I really do. I'm grateful that he's taken a lot of the principles that I've written about in Woke Inc. and elsewhere and tried his best to translate that into action with, I think, some real successes under his belt in Florida. But I think if we're talking about somebody who's going to be representing America across the table of Xi Jinping, you need somebody who has a spine of steel. And I'm just going to be really honest with you. Ron DeSantis is not that person. He just isn't. I think that we see it over the course of the last couple of weeks. The Silicon Valley bailout, and it was a bailout of Silicon Valley itself. I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal on rush timeline to get it out there. We did get it out there shortly before Janet Yellen and the U.S. government made the disastrous decision. I think it was disastrous. I don't know what your opinion is on this, but for reasons I've written about, it was a disastrous bailout. I tried to change the outcome. Okay, I wanted to speak out quickly, not run it through my political consultants or anything else. I care about the country. It's not even about my candidacy. I can tell you this firsthand experience, by the way. I lost countless big-time donors over that position. They were calling me all that weekend saying, we like you. We want to support you. This is crazy. You can't actually support this. These are America's greatest innovators. How could you turn against us? You should know better. There's going to be a bank run on Monday unless we do this, trying every argument against the wall. I was being manipulated, right? This is part of an influence operation. I reject that. Okay, and so I was willing to do that, make a sacrifice for the donor class or whatever. The guy who, in the name of governing Florida, will run in front of a camera to take on a national issue on a given day when it's easy with the conservative base, right? The anti-woke stuff, I mean, by now, Candace, let's just be honest. It's really easy. It wasn't easy when I started talking about this stuff. It wasn't easy when you started talking about this stuff. But now that's candy. That's easy stuff, right? We don't need somebody who just chases candy or even the response to Trump and the potential indictment last weekend. Again, why was I so particular about speaking out instantly. I didn't ask my political consultants. I woke up on Saturday morning. I thought this was wrong. Why did I speak up about it? It's because those of us, myself included, who are running against President Trump have the most credibility, the strongest standing to actually condemn the politicized prosecution of our opponent. It would be convenient if President Trump were the top poller right now. We're out of the race. I'm sure it would be convenient for Ron DeSantis. It would be more convenient for people like me. That's what gives us credibility, though, to call out and hopefully help shape the outcome for the country. And, I pray for the country now that this guy comes to his senses. We'll see. That's pending as we speak, that Alvin Bragg potentially backs off of this politicized persecution through prosecution. Where was Ron DeSantis? Same place he was with respect to the Silicon Valley bailout. Silent. Until a couple days later, when what do you see? A poll tested. Okay, I know condemning woke is good for my base. Now let me just say Soros as many times as I can and hopefully throw that candy at the base without actually addressing the issue head on. It's a politicized prosecution. It's wrong. Yes, it would be convenient if Donald Trump were out of the race politically, but that doesn't matter. This isn't about politics. It's about principle and the country. And to join me in condemning and calling as a fellow American on a misguided district attorney to say, are you actually doing the right thing for the justice system or the country? And if you're not, drop this.